The story of this connection begins with the land which is strangely similar on the coasts of both the southeastern United States and that of Sierra Leone. The vast salt marshes and sea islands of the Carolinas and Georgia are mirrors of the mangrove swamps and wide rivers of West Africa. It's clear the lives of Gullah and African are bound to the land, to the sea, and to each other. When a Gullah man in a South Carolina tidal creek tosses his net, another man in a river in Sierra Leone draws his in. Here in Africa were born the legacies that have passed down to their American cousins. And the channels of history plied by the Gullah and the Sierra Leonean lead back their winding courses to a common source. Over 4 centuries have passed since the earliest Portuguese navigators sailed past this part of West Africa. The Green Mountains prowling the coast reminded them of the king of the beasts, and they named the land Sierra Leone, the mountains of the lion. The people of Ragbonko village in Sierra Leone make coil baskets in a style Sierra Leoneans call shukublai. Her name is Kadiatu, a woman of the Temni people of northern Sierra Leone. She and her neighbors know nothing of the long years of hardship for African Americans, of slavery, Jim Crow, civil rights. In fact, only now is Kadiatu learning that many Americans are black.
So then go there, then take slave from Sierra Leone, then carry them go yonder, then born picking. So say now, they say, don't turn American. But some of them still can make black, some still they eat rice with plaza, and get all this custom where the first people been bring from Africa. Up to now, although it don't take 200 years. So
this is the beginning of an understanding about the connection with family they never knew existed. For Kadiatu and her neighbors see for the first time a basket made by the Gullah people in America. A basket the Gullah called a fana. Marveling at its workmanship, they point out its similarities and differences. In their language, this particular style of basket, low-brimmed and wide, is called fauna. To them, its purpose, like its name, is instantly recognizable. Fanas were once essential to Gullah life. Fauna still are in Sierra Leone. Since ancient times, rice has been a staple food. For 1,000 or more years, songs of the rice harvest have echoed in the fields. Sierra Leone is in the midst of what was called the Rice Coast, an area stretching from the Senegambia south to Sierra Leone and Liberia.
My grandmother, Marcy, she used to teach us different things. I guess she learned it from her old appearance.
In Eugenia D's garden, some sense of Africa remains. Her grandmother taught her the ways of the roots, old secrets of the plant, still important in West African culture and among the Gullahs. But in the knowledge of growing rice, the Gullah reveal even more important connections to Sierra Leone.
Yeah, my grandmother, she always talk about, how they had to work hard. But she didn't come from Africa, but her parents came from Africa. And when they first came over there, they used to work on these rice plantations, plant the rice. And, when they plant the rice, they had to harvest it. When they harvest it, they had to cut it with a hook. They hook it in. And they have to take some like I don't know what you call it. It's two pieces. They'll rub in the middle and beat it off. They have to beat it off to put it in the ground. They cut a hole in the block, call it a mortar, and they had a pestle. Beat that rice off. I seen them done that. Beat that rice off and get it clean. And they had a wide thing they call a fanner. Made of the straw, like a basketball, it was wide, and they fan it according to the wind. Fan and let the hucks go over it, and that's how they got the rice.
Long before Eugenia Dees was born, this way of life had already died out in the Low Country. Near the turn of the century, the last rice crops were harvested from Hampton Plantation, a few miles from McClellanville. It marked the end of an era lasting for 200 years. Literally, hundreds of plantations like this grew along the rice fields. But it was African know-how that made the plantations successful. Only they had a tradition of growing rice, not their masters. And it was African technology that led to the creation of the intricate dikes and waterways, which transformed the low country marshes along the entire southeast coast into thousands upon thousands of acres of successful rice fields. It is a feat of land forming, perhaps unequaled in human history. Only now are the Gullah people, descendants of rice farmers from Africa, learning the truth about their past.
I learned Gullah as a kid from my grandparents, and I never knew it would come so handy today, because we laughed at our grandmother when she spoke Gullah, and that's the only language she knew. And yet it was that language that I now know was the connection to Africa. And I'd like to see how many people in the audience would understand me. As my grandmother would get up and talk this morning, she would say, "How honor to do today? We glad honor day with we today, for greet we family from Africa. We want tell them all about we island. We want make them feel like them they home."
The old-fashioned Gullah words Emery Campbell speaks are no longer commonly used by younger Gullah speakers in the Sea Islands. But to the honored guests, they're familiar. For President Joseph Momo of Sierra Leone, the Gullah sounds like his country's daily speech.
We've had a lot of Gullah this morning spoken. We in Sierra Leone use English as the official language, but the lingua franca is what we call Creole, K-R-I-O, which is exactly your own version of Gullah. And I will just speak Creole a little bit, just to buttress the point that I'm making. So, and in this respect, let me say, my brother and my sister them, me and all my people that we come to Una, happy too much for the year. I suppose you have followed that.
I mean, it was chilling at times just to feel the warmth and the eagerness of the people. Because you see, people around here in these islands, as African as they are, have very little concept of what Africa is like or the connection between Africa and themselves. You know, in Penn School, you know, is the institution that began training Africans after slavery to become Americans. And so most of the people who graduated from Penn School have rejected any kind of Gullah or Gullah culture because they really wanted to be polished Americans. And so people who were at the setting of the president's visit that graduated from Penn School, I could see an immediate change in their attitude toward Gullah. I mean, after the president left, I talked to Penn School graduates now, and they don't mind speaking Gullah and talking about Gullah and arguing about the words in Gullah that they know. But before then, we would have never been able to get them to discuss it.
The reason why I woke up this front because I know I'm handsome.
I want to be ready.
This day gave a new dignity to a people who had long been disparaged for their backward ways and their funny way of talking. President Momo came to Penn Center because of recently uncovered knowledge about the unusual connection. But this research is the culmination of work begun decades ago. South Carolina in the 1930s, among the creeks and islands of the southeast coastal lowcountry, the Gullah were removed from the mainstream of society. This was a culture that a young black scholar named Lorenzo Turner found when he began researching the Gullah and their language. Folklorists and historians had studied this unusual culture before Turner. They concluded that the Gullah merely borrowed and corrupted English and European language and customs. Some even believed the Gullah were addled in their speech, backward baby talkers whose tongues were incapable of forming proper English. Turner pushed these old prejudices aside. More than anyone before him, he was able to penetrate the communities along the coast. Where others heard Gullah only as a primitive pidgin English, Turner found a rich language that owed as much to Africa as it did to Europe. Jokos Tengova, a Sierra Leonean linguist, is following in Turner's footsteps.
That work is seminal. It really is the start-off point for most of us who are now investigating Gullah. Well, Turner's argument is that if one doesn't know about the African languages, then obviously one is not in a position to say there has been an influence from them. So I think that's why he set himself the task of trying to understand some of these languages, and he set for himself the task of trying to study a couple of them, about 30.
Many Gullahs kept private names, basket names they called them. Names that no outsider ever heard. Names like Limba and Loco are strange to our ears, but are very African.
One come as I ain't gonna turn that up as I can buy it because I don't let you see it. As I tell them. And then the next one comes.
What our next one was named? Monday.
Over 100 years ago, a friend of Eugenia Dee's, Agnes Brand, was born into a world where slavery was a recent memory. Her husband's name, Monday, gives a hint of the strong spice of Africa that seasons her life.
I know, but I don't know what you call them too. All I know is name Monday.
Yeah.
That big name Gilly. Monday.
Monday Brown.
Monday Brown.
Yeah,
but
man.
the good old Monday Brown.
Yeah, he was a working man, too.
Yes, so rough.
You were saying why they...
Yeah, I said, you know, that came from Africa. They used to name the children after the days or week in which they're born in.
Yeah.
If they didn't give them the whole name, they give them a part of that name. A part of that name. That's right.
Oh, really?
Just to say that that was Monday. But he was lucky he got the whole name. Big shot. Monday.
So what we're looking at is American English and patterns of American English, dialects and so on and so forth, especially Gullah, which have been influenced by African languages. And we're trying to pinpoint these survivals. For instance, I think Sea Islands people, Gullah speakers, still refer to the expression decline, which means when it dawns.
And I think I want to do clean.
Now that is we have a similar expression in Creole, in Sierra Leone Creole, which would come out as docline. The clouds open up, the clouds break.
Specific connection to Sierra Leone required more exacting proof. The woman Turner found singing this song didn't know what the words meant. But to Turner, the meaning was clear. It was a funeral song of the Mendis, the largest ethnic group of Sierra Leone. It was the most extensive example of African language he or anyone had found among the Gullah. Words Turner found represented African languages from the entire Atlantic coast. Of the 3,000 African words and names used in Gullah speech, a quarter of them came from Sierra Leone. And of the lengthier texts, songs, and story fragments, virtually all come from this one country. From the Temnes in the north, the nomadic Fulas, Vais, and Mende to the south. Even the words Gullah and Geechee were close to the names of the ethnic groups found in Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia, the Gullah and the Gizi. King Jimmy Market, along the harbor of Freetown, draws Sierra Leoneans from all over the country. Although Sierra Leone is a nation only a little larger than South Carolina, it has over a dozen ethnic groups, each with its own language and sometimes several dialects. Communication would be impossible without a common ground, one language everyone knows. That common ground is Creole, which is also the mother tongue of the Creole people. The Creoles, like the Gullah, are descendants of freed slaves. Creole speech evolved from the various tongues of these slaves. In the mountains above Freetown lies a small Creole village of Regent. Clapboard houses dating from over 100 years ago revealed a strong Low Country and West Indian influence on the Creole people. The same influence marks the speech of Creoles like Arthur John.
How you do? How are you? That's how you do. You see? How are you? How you do? But it's, you see, it's similar. You see? Come, go. We talk it in Creole and it's an English word. You see? When we have our own different time of Creole, you see, with no connection with English words. But most of these Creole words derive from the English words.
In Gullah, for example, the phrase, "I'm happy to meet you," becomes, "I'm glad for meet you." And in Creole,
I'm glad for meet you. I'm happy. I'm glad. Happy is used in Creole also. But anyway, if you don't want to say happy, you say I'm glad for see you. I'm glad for meet you.
to a group in Gullah, "I'm glad for meet Una." In Creole,
I'm glad for meet Una. Una. You see? No.
We find it a very useful and the most useful language. But our educational masters before now deprived us of the use of Creole because they derisively refer to it as broken English, and the earlier Sierra Leoneans accepted it.
A.K. Touré holds a doctorate in linguistics and is a cabinet minister in Sierra Leone. He has studied the development and importance of the Creole language.
Language is very, very strongly tied to a people's identity. I mean, it is the storehouse of all their thinking over the centuries, of all their actions, all their beliefs, all their hopes and aspirations are bundled together in their language. And to deprive a people of the use of their language is actually depriving them of a great part of their existence. Because we were deprived of speaking Creole, we had to speak English, in which we were not experts. And the education also deprived us of using our own local languages. So we ended up not speaking any language properly.
Among themselves, however, the Creoles spoke Creole. They held it close to them, and like the Gullah, kept it alive. The Gullah went further, keeping this tongue a secret, an act that allowed the Gullah to remain African in their souls.
Chop it around it so glove with a ball, man. A ball ain't going in the water.
Well, it shows a great willpower, a great strength, a great spiritual strength in them that despite all odds, they carried on. They behaved exactly as I would expect any African to behave under difficult circumstances. If you do research in other languages here, you'll find that we always have a language of secret communication. So the Englishman was here, he made us speak English, and even within that English, we very quickly developed other forms of communication which they heard what we were saying, but they were not able to understand. And I'm sure the use of the Gullah language in Southern Carolina fulfilled part of this need for them to communicate as a means of self-identity without letting their secrets out to their masters.
200 years ago, when a slave ship arrived in Charleston, rice planters would crowd the streets outside the old slave market. They would read bills like this to find out where the slaves originated. Only a premium price at the auction block would buy a slave from the Rice Coast, from Sierra Leone. The records of the slave traders have helped scholars establish a predominant homeland in Sierra Leone for the Gullah people. Today, in the market of Charleston, Africa lives. The sweetgrass basket makers sow their own shuku blai in the shape of fana. Joe Opala is an anthropologist who has studied the Sierra Leone-Gullah connection. This Oklahoma native joined the Peace Corps in 1974 and wound up in Sierra Leone. Once there, he began looking into the history of slavery from the African side of the ocean. For nearly 15 years, he has tracked down a remarkable series of connections that end here in Charleston and begin on a far shore in Africa.
These Gullah people are the descendants of the slaves that were brought to Charleston in the 1700s. They are the descendants of the rice-growing Africans that were brought to those plantations in the 1700s. What is remarkable for us here in Sierra Leone is that these Gullah people have preserved so much language and cultural heritage from this country. Now, how did that happen?
Opala is currently a lecturer at Fura Bay College, the oldest university in sub-Saharan Africa. He now teaches the history that he and others are uncovering.
During this period when slaves were being sent to South Carolina, Bunce Island was a major slave trading base. And Bunce Island is located here in the Sierra Leone River, in the harbor here, about 20 miles from Freetown. And that particular slave castle was virtually specialized in sending slaves from this area to Charleston in South Carolina.
Bunce Island, a quarter-mile-long speck in the Sierra Leone River. It has been called a little bit of Africa that was destroyed to build America. It is the furthest point inland the slave ships could travel without grounding. So it was here they picked up their human cargo. The ruins of the old fort have stood uncared for since the English abolished slave trading in the early 1800s. Today, the cannon that guarded against marauding French Navy and pirate ships lay scattered in a row along the remains of the rampart. For the people who fished the waters here or traveled past on boats, Bunce represented a great mystery. They knew Europeans captured their people, but why? Only a mile downriver from Bunce, the village leaders of Tasso Island gather. In 1978, at a similar gathering, the chief, Pabessa Raka, asked Opala to tell his people what happened to the slaves, to fill in a 200-year gap in history.
So I agree. So the people being calm, I tell them what the slaves.